Part 1, Chapters 1-3. Listen, I'm going to be straight with you about something most people won't admit. We've all been taught that good communication is about choosing the right words, but here's what nobody tells you: the actual words you speak. They're barely 10% of what makes people listen to you, respect you, or even remember what you said. The rest, the real magic, happens in the invisible space between psychology, human connection, and understanding how our brains actually work. Think about it. You know that one friend who walks into a coffee shop and somehow everyone gravitates toward them? They're not necessarily the smartest person there. They might not have the fanciest job or the most impressive achievements, but people lean in when they talk. People ask for their advice. People trust them. And then there's the brilliant engineer you know who has groundbreaking ideas but can't get anyone to take them seriously in meetings. Same room, totally different outcomes. The difference isn't intelligence. It's not even hard work. It's communication mastery, plain and simple. Here's the beautiful truth that changed everything for me. This isn't something you're born with or without. This is a skill, just like learning to ride a bike or cook a decent meal. Every single element, from how you walk into a room to how you use silence to make people hang on your next word, can be learned, practiced, and mastered. The most influential people you admire, the ones who seem to effortlessly guide conversations and win people over, they're following specific psychological patterns. And I'm going to teach you those patterns. You're going to learn how to read a room in seconds, how to organize your thoughts so people actually want to hear what comes next, how to use pauses strategically instead of nervously filling every gap, how to handle pushback without getting defensive or losing respect, and most importantly, how to build that magnetic presence that makes people genuinely interested in what you have to say. But here's the deal. This only works if you actually use it. These aren't concepts to nod along to and forget. These are practical tools you can use today, in your next conversation, in tomorrow's meeting, at dinner with your family tonight. I've tested every technique I'm sharing with you in real situations, from job interviews to first dates, from difficult family conversations to leading teams at work. The psychology of communication is universal. Once you get it, you'll never struggle to be heard, valued, or influential again. Chapter 1, The Silent Killers, Why Your Influence Dies Before You Even Speak. Most of us are accidentally destroying our own influence before we even open our mouths. We're making fundamental mistakes that broadcast weakness, uncertainty, and low confidence to everyone around us. And the worst part, 95% of people make these mistakes without even knowing it, quietly sabotaging their ability to be taken seriously. The first silent killer is what I call reactive mode. This is when you're constantly waiting for others to set the tone, start the conversation, or decide where things go. You respond instead of initiating. You follow instead of guiding. You let everyone else control the energy and direction of every single interaction. This immediately puts you in a follower position, not a leader position. When you're always reacting, you're unconsciously training people to see you as someone who waits for permission rather than someone who takes initiative. Reactive communicators use phrases like, "I think maybe," "You're probably right," "I'm not sure, but..." They ask permission to share their thoughts. They apologize for having opinions. They constantly look for validation from others. This creates a weird psychological pattern where people unconsciously label them as less important, less confident, less worth paying serious attention to. Our brains are wired to respect certainty, and strength and reactive communication signals the exact opposite. The second silent killer is information avalanche. So many people think that throwing more facts, more details, more statistics at someone will convince them. They believe if they just provide enough evidence, people will naturally come around to their way of thinking. This is completely backward. Here's the thing. Our brains don't process information logically first. We process emotionally. Then we find logical reasons to support those emotions. When you dump mountains of information on people, you're not persuading them. You're overwhelming them. You're creating what psychologists call cognitive overload, which triggers mental resistance. People stop listening, not because your information is wrong, but because their brain literally can't handle it all at once. Information dumping also tells people you don't really understand what they need, what they care about, or how much they can actually absorb. It's like trying to fill a cup by dumping a whole bucket of water on it. Most of it just spills everywhere. The third silent killer is emotional bleeding. This happens when your internal emotional state unconsciously leaks out through your voice, your tone, your body language, your choice of words, even when you're actively trying to hide it. If you're nervous, anxious, insecure, or desperately wanting approval, these emotions seep out in ways you don't even realize. And people can sense it instantly. It destroys your credibility in seconds. Emotional bleeding shows up in subtle but devastating ways. Your voice might get a bit higher when you're nervous. You might talk faster when you're anxious. You might use more and when you're uncertain. You might lean in too much when you're desperate for someone to like you. These tiny signals communicate more than your actual words ever could. They're telling people, I'm not in control of myself right now. And if you can't control your own emotions, why would anyone trust you with important decisions or responsibilities? The fourth silent killer is chameleon communication. This is when you unconsciously mirror the communication style, energy level, and even opinions of whoever you're talking to. Chameleon communicators become shapeshifters, constantly adjusting their personality to match their environment. They think this makes them more likable, but it actually makes them forgettable, and frankly, a bit untrustworthy. When you mirror everyone, you lose your unique voice. People can feel that you're not being authentic, and they stop taking you seriously. Chameleon communication also prevents you from adding any real value to conversations because you're just echoing what's already been said. Instead of being seen as agreeable, you're seen as weak, wishy-washy, and lacking any real personal conviction. The fifth silent killer is defensive mode. This happens when you interpret neutral questions or normal comments as personal attacks and respond defensively. Defensive communicators are constantly explaining themselves, justifying their actions, protecting their ego. They turn everyday conversations into exhausting battles, and people start avoiding them because it's just too draining. Defensive communication creates this negative spiral. When you get defensive, others naturally become more aggressive, which makes you even more defensive, which makes them more aggressive. This pattern destroys relationships, erodes trust, and makes people literally dread communicating with you. It also signals deep insecurity about your competence or authority, which completely undermines any influence you're trying to build. The sixth silent killer is approval addiction. This is when your number one goal in every conversation is to be liked rather than to be respected or effective. Approval addicts constantly monitor other people's reactions and adjust their message based on what they think people want to hear. They avoid disagreement. They sacrifice their real opinions. They prioritize keeping the peace over being honest. This might seem nice on the surface, but it's actually manipulative and weak. When people sense you care more about being liked than being truthful, they lose respect for you. They also stop trusting your opinions because they know you'll tell them what makes them happy rather than what they need to hear. This makes you irrelevant in any conversation that actually matters. The seventh silent killer is unconscious communication. Most people have never actually studied how communication works, so they just wing it and hope for the best. They don't understand how tone affects how people receive their message, how word choice creates completely different meanings, or how body language influences outcomes. This is like trying to perform surgery without knowing anything about the human body. You might get lucky occasionally, but you'll probably cause more harm than good. Unconscious communicators repeat the same mistakes over and over because they don't know what they're doing wrong. They blame others for misunderstanding them instead of taking responsibility for unclear communication. They get frustrated when people don't respond how they want, but they never examine their own role in creating those outcomes. These 7 silent killers are everywhere in modern society, and they're the reason most people struggle with influence, authority, and respect. But here's the good news. Once you become aware of these patterns, you can start changing them immediately. Every single conversation becomes an opportunity to practice conscious, strategic communication that builds your influence instead of tearing it down. Chapter 2: The 3-Second Rule: Why People Judge You Instantly and How to Use It. Your brain makes lightning-fast judgments about other people in less than 3 seconds, and those snap judgments are incredibly hard to change once they're formed. This isn't some flaw in human nature, it's actually a survival mechanism that evolved over millions of years to help us quickly identify who's safe, who's a threat, who's an ally, and who might be an opportunity. Understanding how these split-second impressions work gives you incredible power because you can consciously shape them instead of leaving them to random chance. The human brain processes first impressions through multiple channels all at once. Your appearance, your posture, your facial expressions, your voice, your tone, your energy level, your opening words, all of it gets analyzed instantly and unconsciously. Within 3 seconds, people have already decided whether you're competent, confident, trustworthy, high status, or low status, and these snap decisions shape every single interaction you have with them moving forward. This happens because of something psychologists call thin slice judgments. The brain takes a tiny sliver of information and uses it to make sweeping predictions about your character, your abilities, your intentions. These predictions are surprisingly accurate for basic personality traits, but they're also heavily influenced by unconscious biases and social conditioning. This means you can trigger positive first impressions by understanding what signals the brain is actively looking for. The first element of powerful first impressions is physical presence. Before you say a single word, people are evaluating your posture, your movement, your spatial awareness. Confident people take up appropriate space. They move with purpose. They maintain steady, controlled movements. They don't fidget, rush around, or make themselves physically smaller. Their physical presence communicates, I belong in this space, and I have every right to be here. Physical presence starts with posture. Stand or sit with your spine straight, shoulders relaxed back, head level. This isn't about being stiff or rigid, it's about being aligned and grounded. When your posture is strong and stable, it triggers unconscious associations with competence, leadership, emotional control. When your posture is weak, collapsed, or jittery, it signals insecurity, nervousness, low confidence. Your movement patterns also say volumes about your internal state. Confident people move deliberately and smoothly. They don't rush unless there's genuine urgency, and they don't move in slow motion unless they're being intentional about creating a specific effect. Their movements have purpose, direction, control, which signals they have control over themselves and their environment. The second element is facial expression and eye contact. Your face is the most expressive part of your body, and people read it constantly for emotional information. Confident communicators maintain relaxed, alert facial expressions that show they're engaged but not overly eager. They make appropriate eye contact that demonstrates interest and attention without being aggressive or invasive. Eye contact patterns are particularly important for establishing authority and connection. Strong eye contact signals confidence, honesty, engagement, but too much becomes aggressive and uncomfortable. The sweet spot is maintaining eye contact for 3 to 5 second intervals while you're speaking and 4 to 6 second intervals while you're listening. This creates a sense of connection without triggering discomfort or weird dominance battles. Your facial expressions should match your internal emotional state and your intended message. If you're nervous but trying to appear confident, that mismatch will be painfully obvious and completely undermine your credibility. This is why genuine emotional regulation is so crucial for powerful communication. You need to actually feel calm and confident, not just try to fake it. The third element is vocal quality and tone. Your voice carries massive amounts of information about your emotional state, confidence level, social status. Within seconds of hearing you speak, people make judgments about your competence, authority, trustworthiness, based purely on how you sound, not what you're saying. Confident voices have certain characteristics. They're well supported by breath, which creates a full, rich tone. They have a controlled pace, which shows thoughtfulness and intentionality. They have appropriate volume, which demonstrates awareness of the space and audience. They have clear articulation, which signals education and attention to detail. They have varied intonation, which keeps people engaged and interested. Many people unconsciously sabotage their vocal authority by speaking too quietly, which signals insecurity, speaking too fast, which signals nervousness, or using uptalk, which makes statements sound like questions. These vocal patterns immediately lower your perceived status and competence, regardless of what you're actually saying. The fourth element is your opening words and energy. The first thing you say sets the tone for the entire conversation, and people remember it disproportionately because of something called the primacy effect. Confident communicators open with clear, purposeful statements that establish their authority and set the direction for the discussion. Weak openings include apologizing for speaking, interrupting, or taking up time. They include uncertain phrases like, "I'm not sure if this is right, but," or "I hope you don't mind me saying." They include excessive pleasantries or small talk that wastes time and dilutes your message. These patterns immediately signal that you don't value your own time or opinions, which trains others to devalue them as well. Strong openings are direct, purposeful, confident. They might include a clear statement of your purpose, an interesting observation that demonstrates insight, or a strategic question that engages the other person's thinking. The key is to lead the conversation from the very first moment, rather than waiting for others to set the direction. The fifth element is emotional congruence. This means your words, emotions, and body language all align and support the same message. When there's incongruence between these channels, people unconsciously sense something is off, and they become less trusting and less engaged. Emotional congruence requires genuine confidence and emotional regulation. You can't fake it effectively because microexpressions, body language, and vocal qualities leak your true emotional state, no matter how hard you try to hide them. This is why developing real confidence and emotional control is so much more effective than trying to use superficial tricks to appear confident. The neuroscience of first impressions reveals that people are constantly evaluating you on multiple levels simultaneously. They're assessing your competence, your confidence, your trustworthiness, your status, your intentions, all within the first few seconds of meeting you. By understanding how these assessments work, you can consciously influence them and create powerful, positive first impressions that open doors and create opportunities you never thought possible. Chapter 3: The Quiet Power: How to Command Respect Without Raising Your Voice. Most people think authority comes from being loud, aggressive, or dominating others. But real authority? It's the complete opposite. True authority is calm, controlled, magnetic. It draws people in rather than pushing them away, and it creates genuine respect rather than fear or resentment. Understanding the difference between authority and aggression is absolutely crucial, because one builds your influence while the other slowly destroys it. Authority is based on competence, confidence, emotional control. When you have genuine authority, people naturally defer to your judgment, seek your opinions, follow your lead. This happens because authority triggers unconscious respect and trust. People feel safe around authoritative individuals because they sense these people have control over themselves and their environment. Aggression, on the other hand, is based on force, intimidation, emotional reactivity. Aggressive people might get temporary compliance, but they don't get genuine respect or willing cooperation. Aggression actually signals weakness because it shows you need to use force to get what you want, rather than earning it through competence and character. The first element of natural authority is emotional regulation. Authoritative people remain calm and controlled even in stressful situations. They don't get defensive, angry, or flustered when challenged. This emotional stability signals strength, competence, leadership capability. When others see you maintain your composure under pressure, they naturally view you as someone who can handle responsibility and make good decisions. Emotional regulation doesn't mean being emotionless or robotic. It means being able to choose your emotional responses rather than being controlled by them. Authoritative people feel emotions, but they process them internally before responding. This allows them to respond strategically rather than reactively, which leads to better outcomes and increased respect. The second element is intellectual confidence. This means having well thought out opinions based on solid reasoning and being able to articulate them clearly and persuasively. Intellectual confidence shows up in how you present ideas, defend positions, engage with opposing viewpoints. You're not afraid of intellectual challenges because you've done the work to develop informed perspectives. Intellectual confidence is completely different from arrogance. Arrogant people think they know everything and dismiss other viewpoints without consideration. Intellectually confident people know what they know, acknowledge what they don't know, and they're genuinely open to learning and changing their minds when presented with better information. But they don't waver on principles they've carefully considered. The third element is purposeful communication. Authoritative people communicate with clear intention behind every single word. They don't speak just to fill silence or to be polite. When they contribute to conversations, they add genuine value through insights, questions, or information that moves the discussion forward. This purposefulness makes others pay attention because they know when you speak, it's actually worth listening to. Purposeful communication also means being selective about when you speak. Authoritative people don't feel compelled to comment on everything or prove their intelligence in every conversation. They speak when they have something meaningful to contribute and remain silent when they don't. This selectivity makes their words carry significantly more weight when they do choose to speak. The fourth element is boundary setting. Authority requires clear boundaries about what you will and won't accept in terms of behavior, treatment, communication. These boundaries aren't aggressive or punitive. They're simply clear statements about your standards and expectations. When people know where your boundaries are, they're much more likely to respect them and respect you. Setting boundaries effectively requires calm consistency. You don't need to get angry or aggressive to enforce boundaries. You just need to be clear about consequences and follow through consistently. When someone crosses a boundary, you address it directly and matter-of-factly, without drama or emotional escalation. This shows you take yourself seriously and expect others to do the same. The fifth element is competence demonstration. Real authority is ultimately based on proven ability to get results. People respect you when they see evidence that you know what you're doing and can deliver on your promises. This competence can be demonstrated through past achievements, current performance, or clear expertise in relevant areas. Competence demonstration isn't about bragging or showing off. It's about quietly and consistently proving your value through your actions and results. When people see you consistently deliver high-quality work, meet deadlines, solve problems, add value, they naturally begin to defer to your judgment and seek your input. The sixth element is strategic vulnerability. This might seem counterintuitive, but showing appropriate vulnerability actually strengthens authority rather than weakening it. Strategic vulnerability means being honest about limitations, acknowledging mistakes, asking for help when needed. This shows confidence and emotional maturity rather than weakness. The key is that vulnerability must be strategic and appropriate. Sharing every insecurity, doubt, or personal problem undermines authority. But acknowledging specific limitations or mistakes while taking responsibility for them actually increases trust and respect. It shows you're honest, self-aware, focused on results rather than protecting your ego. The seventh element is social calibration. Authoritative people understand social dynamics and adjust their communication style to fit the situation without compromising their core principles. They know when to be more formal or casual, when to be direct or diplomatic, when to lead or support. This social intelligence allows them to maintain authority across different contexts and relationships. Social calibration requires observing and understanding the unspoken rules of different social environments. What works in a business meeting might not work at a family dinner. What's appropriate with friends might not be appropriate with colleagues or bosses. Authoritative people navigate these differences skillfully while maintaining their authentic personality and values. Authority is not about dominating others or getting your way through force. It's about earning respect through competence, character, emotional maturity. When you develop genuine authority, people naturally want to follow your lead, seek your advice, respect your decisions. This creates influence that lasts and relationships that strengthen over time rather than deteriorating due to resentment or fear. Part 2, Chapters 4, 6. Chapter 4, The Persuasion Blueprint, Changing Minds Without Playing Games. Let's get something straight right from the start. Persuasion is not manipulation. Manipulation involves tricking or pressuring people into acting against their own best interests for your benefit. Persuasion involves helping people make decisions that genuinely serve them while also achieving your legitimate goals. Understanding this distinction isn't just important, it's everything, because ethical persuasion creates relationships and results that last, while manipulation destroys trust and eventually explodes in your face. The foundation of ethical persuasion is understanding how people actually make decisions in real life. Most of us think decision-making is this logical, rational process where we weigh pros and cons carefully, but neuroscience tells a completely different story. Decisions are primarily emotional. People make choices based on how they feel. Then they use logic to justify those feelings to themselves and others afterward. This means effective persuasion must connect with emotions first, then provide logical scaffolding to support the emotional choice. This doesn't mean manipulating emotions or creating fake feelings. It means understanding what people genuinely care about and helping them see how your proposal connects to their real values, priorities, desires. When persuasion aligns with someone's authentic interests and emotions, it feels natural and beneficial rather than pushy or sleazy. The first principle of the persuasion blueprint is identifying core motivations. Everyone has primary drivers that guide their decisions. These might include security, achievement, recognition, autonomy, connection, growth, contribution. Before you even attempt to persuade someone, you need to understand what really motivates them, not what you think should motivate them or what motivates you. You can identify motivations through careful observation and strategic questions. What topics make their eyes light up with genuine enthusiasm? What concerns keep them up at night? What achievements do they talk about with the most pride? What fears do they actively try to avoid? What values do they consistently defend even when it's uncomfortable? Understanding these deeper motivations allows you to frame your proposals in ways that genuinely resonate with their priorities. The second principle is establishing genuine rapport and trust. People are only persuaded by people they actually like, trust, and respect. This rapport can't be faked through cheap tricks like artificially mirroring body language or repeatedly using someone's name. Real rapport comes from authentic interest in the other person, demonstrated competence, and consistent reliability over time. Building rapport requires fundamentally shifting your focus from what you want to get to what you can give. When you genuinely care about helping someone solve their problems or achieve their goals, they sense this authenticity and become much more open to your influence. This doesn't mean being selfless or sacrificing your interests. It means finding genuine alignment between what you want and what they want. The third principle is strategic storytelling. Here's a truth. Facts tell, but stories sell. Stories engage emotions, create vivid mental pictures, make abstract concepts concrete and memorable. Instead of presenting dry information or purely logical arguments, you embed your key points in compelling narratives that help people visualize and emotionally experience the benefits of your proposal. Effective persuasion stories have specific elements that make them work. They feature relatable characters facing challenges similar to your audience's situation. They include specific sensory details that make the story vivid and impossible to forget. They show clear cause and effect relationships between actions and outcomes. They end with results your audience desperately wants to achieve, and they position your proposal as the critical factor that enabled the positive outcome. The fourth principle is addressing resistance proactively. Every person has reasons for potentially saying no to your proposal, and pretending those concerns don't exist doesn't make them disappear. Skilled persuaders identify likely objections and address them before they're even raised. This shows you genuinely understand the other person's perspective and have thoughtfully considered their concerns. Addressing resistance isn't about overpowering objections with stronger arguments or talking people into submission. It's about acknowledging legitimate concerns and providing genuine solutions or alternatives. Sometimes this means modifying your proposal to better meet their needs. Sometimes it means providing additional information or assurances that ease their worries. Sometimes it means accepting that your proposal isn't right for them at this particular moment. The fifth principle is creating urgency without pressure. People postpone decisions when there's no compelling reason to act now. Effective persuasion includes legitimate reasons why acting sooner is better than waiting. This might include limited availability, time-sensitive opportunities, or increasing costs or difficulties over time. The absolutely critical thing is that urgency must be real, not manufactured. Creating false deadlines or fake scarcity backfires spectacularly when people discover the deception. But highlighting genuine time-sensitive factors helps people overcome natural procrastination and indecision. You're not pressuring them unfairly. You're helping them avoid the negative consequences of unnecessary delay. The sixth principle is making it easy to say yes. Even when people genuinely want to accept your proposal, they might hesitate if the process seems complicated, risky, or overwhelming. Effective persuasion removes as many barriers as possible and makes the next step crystal clear, simple, low risk. This might involve breaking a large commitment into smaller, more manageable steps, providing guarantees or trial periods that reduce perceived risk, reducing upfront costs or investments, or handling administrative details yourself so they don't have to worry about logistics. The easier you make it for people to move forward, the more likely they are to actually do it, even when they're genuinely interested. The seventh principle is confirming commitment and establishing next steps. Many persuasion attempts fail not because people aren't convinced, but because the conversation ends without clear agreement about what happens next. Once someone agrees to your proposal, you absolutely must confirm their commitment and establish specific next steps with timelines and responsibilities. This confirmation serves multiple crucial purposes. It ensures you both understand exactly what was agreed to. It creates psychological commitment through the consistency principle. It prevents the agreement from being forgotten or deprioritized amid other responsibilities. And it maintains momentum by establishing immediate action steps rather than leaving everything vaguely for later. The persuasion blueprint works because it aligns with how people naturally think, feel, and make decisions. It doesn't try to override their judgment or manipulate their emotions. Instead, it helps them make good decisions by providing relevant information, addressing legitimate concerns, and making it easy to take action that serves their genuine interests while also achieving your objectives. Chapter 5. Strategic Silence. The most powerful words you'll never say. Most people are genuinely terrified of silence in conversations. They feel this overwhelming compulsion to fill every single pause with words, even when they have absolutely nothing meaningful to say. This fear of silence completely destroys their communication power because it makes them appear nervous, anxious, desperately lacking in confidence. Learning to use silence strategically is honestly one of the most powerful communication skills you can possibly develop. Silence is not just the absence of communication, it's a completely different form of communication. Strategic silence can convey confidence, authority, thoughtfulness, control. It can create space for others to reveal important information they wouldn't otherwise share. It can add tremendous weight and impact to your words. It can diffuse tension and create genuine connection. And it gives you precious time to think before responding instead of just reacting impulsively. The first type of strategic silence is the confidence pause. This is a brief silence before you speak that shows you're deliberately choosing your words carefully, rather than blurting out the first thing that pops into your mind. Confident people are completely comfortable with this pause because they are not desperate to prove themselves or fill every moment with nervous chatter. The confidence pause works brilliantly because it signals thoughtfulness and intentionality. When you pause before speaking, people unconsciously assume what you're about to say is worth the wait. This makes them pay much closer attention to your words and gives your message significantly more impact. It also gives you valuable time to organize your thoughts and choose the most effective way to communicate your point. The second type is the emphasis pause. This is a strategic silence immediately after making an important point that allows it to truly sink in before you move on to the next thing. Most people rush frantically from point to point without giving their audience any time to actually process important information. The emphasis pause ensures your key messages are absorbed and remembered rather than lost in a continuous stream of talking. Emphasis pauses are particularly powerful after making bold statements, asking important questions, or delivering surprising information. The silence creates mental space for the other person to genuinely consider what you've said rather than immediately thinking about their response or counter-argument. This dramatically increases the likelihood your message will actually influence their thinking and decision-making. The third type is the invitation silence. This is a longer pause that creates space for the other person to contribute to the conversation. So many people monopolize conversations by talking continuously which completely prevents them from learning important information about the other person's thoughts, feelings, motivations. Invitation silences encourage others to share more than they initially intended. Invitation silences work because most people feel genuinely compelled to fill conversational gaps. When you create space through silence, others will often reveal information they absolutely wouldn't share if you kept talking. This information can be invaluable for understanding their perspectives, building genuine rapport, and identifying opportunities for connection or persuasion. The fourth type is the processing pause. This is a silence that gives you time to actually think before responding to difficult questions or challenging statements. Instead of feeling pressured to respond immediately, you can take a moment to consider your options and choose the most strategic response. This prevents you from saying something you'll deeply regret and helps you maintain control of the conversation. Processing pauses are especially important when dealing with confrontation, criticism, or high-pressure situations. The natural human tendency is to defend yourself immediately, but this almost always leads to reactive responses that escalate conflict or undermine your position. A strategic pause allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than emotionally, which consistently leads to much better outcomes. The fifth type is the tension pause. This is a silence that allows uncomfortable emotions or difficult topics to exist without immediately trying to fix them or rush past them. Many people are so profoundly uncomfortable with tension that they rush to resolve it even when sitting with the discomfort would actually be far more productive. Tension pauses can be incredibly powerful in negotiations, difficult conversations, or when addressing performance issues. Instead of immediately offering solutions or reassurances, you allow the other person to feel the full weight of the situation. This often motivates them to take genuine responsibility or propose solutions themselves rather than passively waiting for you to fix their problems. The sixth type is the reflection silence. This is a pause that gives both parties time to genuinely consider what has been discussed before moving to the next topic or making important decisions. Reflection silences prevent rushed decisions and ensure that important conversations receive adequate, thoughtful consideration. Reflection silences are particularly valuable at the end of important discussions or before making significant commitments. They allow everyone involved to mentally review what has been covered, identify any remaining questions or concerns, and confirm their understanding before proceeding. This prevents misunderstandings and regrettable, hasty decisions. Using silence effectively requires overcoming your deep discomfort with conversational gaps. Most people find silence awkward because they interpret it as a sign the conversation isn't going well. But strategic silence actually improves conversation quality dramatically by creating space for deeper thinking, more genuine sharing, and more thoughtful responses. The key to comfortable silence is fundamentally shifting your mindset from feeling responsible for constant entertainment to being genuinely confident in your presence. You don't need to fill every single moment with words to add value to a conversation. Sometimes the absolute most valuable thing you can contribute is attentive listening and thoughtful pauses that encourage others to share more deeply and authentically. Practicing strategic silence also requires paying close attention to your own emotional state. If you're anxious, nervous, or insecure, you'll feel tremendous pressure to fill silence with chatter. But if you're calm, confident, centered, you'll be completely comfortable with conversational pauses, and able to use them strategically to enhance your communication effectiveness. The power of silence lies in its remarkable rarity. In a world where most people talk way too much and listen far too little, those who master strategic silence stand out as unusually thoughtful, confident, compelling communicators. They're remembered not just for what they say, but for how they make others feel genuinely heard, understood, and respected through their attentive listening and strategic pauses. Chapter 6. Reading the Room, Adapting Your Style to Any Situation. The most sophisticated communicators possess this almost magical ability to read social situations and adapt their communication style accordingly. They seem to instinctively know exactly what to say, how to say it, and when to just remain silent in literally any environment. This isn't some supernatural gift or natural-born talent. It's a completely learnable skill called social calibration, and it's the difference between being effective in one narrow context versus being genuinely powerful in every single context you encounter. Social calibration is the ability to accurately assess the unwritten rules of any social environment and adjust your communication to work within those rules while still achieving your objectives. Every social situation has invisible dynamics, power structures, cultural norms, emotional undercurrents that determine what kind of communication will be effective and what will completely backfire. Most people fail spectacularly at social calibration because they use the exact same communication approach in every situation. They speak to their boss the same way they speak to their friends. They use the same tone in formal meetings that they use in casual conversations. They apply identical strategies in high-tension situations that they use in relaxed environments. This lack of adaptation severely limits their influence and often creates completely unnecessary conflict or resistance. The first element of social calibration is situational awareness. Before you even open your mouth, you need to assess the environment you're entering. What's the formal hierarchy, and who actually holds decision-making power? What's the emotional climate? Are people stressed, relaxed, anxious, excited? What are the cultural norms? What behaviors are expected versus absolutely prohibited? What's the time pressure? How much depth versus efficiency is actually required? Situational awareness requires observing multiple channels simultaneously. You're reading body language, listening to tone patterns, noting who speaks and who stays silent, watching how people position themselves physically, identifying who others defer to or actively seek approval from. This information tells you how to position yourself and what communication style will be most effective in this specific situation. The second element is audience analysis. Different people respond to completely different types of communication, and effective calibration requires understanding your specific audience. Are they analytical people who want hard facts and pure logic, or relational people who want emotional connection and storytelling? Are they detail-oriented people who need comprehensive information, or big-picture people who want high-level summary and vision? Are they risk-averse people who need reassurance, or risk-tolerant people who respond to bold proposals? You can assess audience preferences through several indicators. Their professional background often predicts their communication preferences pretty accurately. Engineers and analysts typically prefer logical, highly structured presentations, while sales and marketing people often respond much better to emotional storytelling and relationship building. Their questions reveal whether they think in minute details or broad concepts, whether they focus on problems or opportunities, whether they prioritize safety or growth potential. The third element is power dynamics assessment. Every social situation has formal and informal power structures that determine how influence actually flows. Formal power comes from titles, positions, official authority. Informal power comes from relationships, expertise, social status, personal charisma. Effective communication requires understanding both types of power and adapting your approach accordingly. When communicating with people who have higher formal power, you typically need to be more structured, respectful, results-focused. You should prepare thoroughly, present information clearly, respect their time constraints. When communicating with people who have informal power, you might need to be more relational, collaborative, patient in building genuine consensus. Understanding power dynamics also helps you avoid accidentally threatening or undermining powerful people. Some communication styles that work perfectly well with peers can completely backfire with superiors if they seem disrespectful or presumptuous. Other styles that work with subordinates can appear weak or indecisive with peers or superiors. The fourth element is cultural competence. Every organization, industry, social group has unique cultural norms that profoundly affect communication effectiveness. These cultures determine what topics are safe versus dangerous, what communication styles are respected versus rejected, and what behaviors signal competence versus incompetence. Corporate cultures vary dramatically in their communication preferences. Some value direct, confrontational debate, while others prioritize harmony and consensus above all else. Some reward bold risk-taking, while others punish any deviation from established procedures. Some encourage informal, casual interaction, while others maintain strict professional boundaries. Misreading these cultural signals can absolutely destroy your credibility and influence almost instantly. Cultural competence requires carefully observing how successful people in that environment actually communicate and modeling their effective patterns while deliberately avoiding their mistakes. You're looking for the unwritten rules that determine who gets promoted, who gets listened to, and who gets marginalized based purely on their communication style. The fifth element is emotional intelligence calibration. Every social situation has an emotional tone that affects how people receive and process communication. High-stress environments require completely different approaches than relaxed environments. Celebratory situations call for different energy than problem-solving situations. Crisis moments demand different strategies than routine interactions. Emotional calibration means matching your energy and tone to the situational requirements while still maintaining your authentic personality. If everyone is stressed and urgent, you can't be slow and casual without appearing completely disconnected. If everyone is formal and serious, you can't be playful and irreverent without seeming wildly inappropriate. But you also can't completely suppress your personality, or you'll appear fake and untrustworthy. The sixth element is strategic flexibility. Social calibration isn't about becoming a shapeshifter who has no consistent identity. It's about being strategically flexible in your communication approach while maintaining your core values and objectives. You're adapting your methods, not your principles, your style, not your substance, your presentation, not your purpose. Strategic flexibility requires having multiple communication approaches in your repertoire. You need to be able to communicate analytically when the situation requires logic, emotionally when connection is needed, assertively when leadership is required, and collaboratively when consensus building is important. This range allows you to be genuinely effective across wildly diverse situations and relationships. The seventh element is real-time adjustment. Social calibration isn't just about reading a situation correctly at the beginning. It's about continuously monitoring feedback and adjusting your approach as the situation naturally evolves. People's moods change, power dynamics shift, new information emerges that requires communication strategy modifications. Real-time adjustment requires paying extremely close attention to micro-feedback signals. Are people leaning in or leaning back? Are they asking questions or remaining silent? Are they making eye contact or looking away? Are they nodding in agreement or showing subtle signs of confusion or disagreement? This feedback tells you whether your current approach is working or needs immediate modification. Effective real-time adjustment also requires having the emotional flexibility to change course without losing confidence or composure. Many people get locked into communication approaches even when they're clearly not working because changing feels like admitting failure. But strategic adaptation is actually a powerful sign of social intelligence, not weakness. Mastering social calibration transforms you from someone who's effective only in comfortable, familiar contexts to someone who can genuinely succeed in literally any environment. You become the person others instinctively rely on for important conversations, difficult negotiations, high-stakes presentations, because you have this rare ability to read situations accurately and communicate in ways that achieve results while maintaining and strengthening relationships. Part 3, Chapters 7-9. Chapter 7. Building Unshakable Confidence, the Algorithm for Self-Assurance. Confidence isn't some personality trait you're either born with or doomed to live without forever. It's a skill you can systematically build, practice, and master. Most people have this completely backward. They think confidence comes from success, but the reality is exactly reversed. Confidence creates success, not the other way around. When you truly understand how confidence actually works, you can build it deliberately and maintain it consistently, regardless of what's happening around you. The foundation of unshakable confidence is understanding the critical difference between outcome-based confidence and process-based confidence. Outcome-based confidence depends entirely on external results and other people's approval. When things go well, you feel confident. When they don't, you feel insecure and uncertain. This type of confidence is fragile and completely unreliable because you can't actually control outcomes or other people's reactions. Process-based confidence comes from trusting your ability to handle whatever happens. It's based on your preparation, your competence, your emotional resilience, rather than specific results. When you have process-based confidence, you remain steady and self-assured even when outcomes are uncertain or disappointing, because you know you have the skills and character to navigate any situation effectively. The first element of the confidence algorithm is competence building. Real confidence is rooted in real ability, and you genuinely can't fake competence for very long without being exposed. This means building confidence requires continuously developing your knowledge, skills, expertise in areas that matter to your goals and responsibilities. Competence building isn't just about technical skills, though. It also includes communication skills, emotional regulation, leadership abilities, problem-solving capabilities, social intelligence. The broader your competence base, the more confident you can be in diverse situations because you know you have the tools to add value and achieve results. The key to competence building is deliberate practice, focused specifically on your weaknesses and challenges. Most people practice what they're already good at because it feels comfortable and rewarding. But genuine confidence comes from knowing you can handle difficult situations, which requires practicing the exact skills you'll need when things go wrong. The second element is preparation mastery. Confidence grows exponentially when you know you've prepared thoroughly for whatever challenges you might face. This preparation includes researching relevant information, anticipating potential problems, developing contingency plans, rehearsing important communications or presentations. Preparation mastery goes way beyond surface-level planning to include mental and emotional preparation. You visualize successful outcomes, but you also prepare mentally for potential setbacks or difficulties. You practice staying calm and focused under pressure. You develop quick decision-making processes for unexpected situations. This comprehensive preparation gives you genuine confidence that you can handle absolutely anything that comes up. The third element is evidence accumulation. Your brain builds confidence by accumulating evidence that you can succeed in challenging situations. Every single time you handle a difficult conversation, navigate a complex problem, or achieve a meaningful goal, you add to your personal evidence bank of competence. Most people don't pay nearly enough attention to their successes and accomplishments, so they don't get the confidence benefits from their achievements. They obsess over failures and problems while dismissing or minimizing their successes. Building confidence requires deliberately noting and remembering evidence of your capabilities and achievements. You can accelerate evidence accumulation by setting progressive challenges that stretch your abilities without completely overwhelming them. Start with situations slightly outside your comfort zone and gradually increase the difficulty as your confidence grows. Each success builds powerful evidence that you can handle increasingly challenging situations. The fourth element is self-talk optimization. Your internal dialogue has enormous impact on your confidence levels because your brain believes what you tell it repeatedly. Most people have deeply negative self-talk patterns that systematically undermine their confidence through constant self-criticism, doubt, catastrophic thinking. Optimizing self-talk doesn't mean unrealistic positive thinking or denying genuine challenges. It means developing accurate, realistic self-assessment that acknowledges both your strengths and areas for improvement, without being unnecessarily harsh or defeatist. You speak to yourself the way you would speak to a valued friend, objective, supportive, constructive. Effective self-talk focuses on process rather than outcome, on effort rather than innate ability, on learning rather than proving. Instead of telling yourself you have to be perfect, you remind yourself you're capable of handling challenges and learning from mistakes. Instead of fearing failure, you frame difficulties as opportunities to demonstrate resilience and problem-solving skills. The fifth element is posture and physiology management. Your physical state directly affects your emotional and mental state through the mind-body connection. When you maintain confident posture, move with purpose, control your breathing, You actually feel more confident, not just appear more confident. Confident physiology includes standing or sitting with proper alignment, moving deliberately rather than frantically, making appropriate eye contact, using controlled gestures that support your communication. These physical practices don't just project confidence to others, they generate genuine feelings of confidence within yourself. Breathing patterns are particularly important for confidence management. Shallow, rapid breathing triggers anxiety and nervousness, while deep, controlled breathing promotes calm confidence. Learning to regulate your breathing gives you a powerful tool for managing your emotional state in literally any situation. The sixth element is comfort zone expansion. Confidence grows through direct experience with challenging situations, and you can't build that experience by staying safely in your comfort zone. This requires deliberately seeking out situations that stretch your abilities and force you to develop new skills and capabilities. Comfort zone expansion should be systematic and progressive rather than reckless and overwhelming. You want to challenge yourself enough to grow, but not so much that you become overwhelmed and lose confidence. The goal is to gradually expand your comfort zone. So, situations that once seemed impossible become routine and manageable. Each time you successfully navigate a situation outside your previous comfort zone, you expand your confidence for similar situations in the future. Over time, this process builds deep, unshakable confidence because you have extensive evidence that you can adapt and succeed in diverse, challenging circumstances. The seventh element is identity alignment. The most powerful confidence comes from alignment between your actions and your authentic identity. When you're trying to be someone you're not, or acting in ways that contradict your values, you feel insecure and uncertain regardless of your external success. Identity-aligned confidence means knowing who you are, what you stand for, what you're capable of achieving. It means being genuinely comfortable with your strengths and limitations without feeling the need to pretend or compensate. It means acting in ways that reflect your genuine personality and values, rather than trying to meet other people's expectations. This type of confidence is truly unshakable because it doesn't depend on external validation or approval. You know who you are and you're completely comfortable with that identity regardless of what others think. This inner security gives you the freedom to communicate authentically and take appropriate risks without being paralyzed by fear of rejection or failure. The confidence algorithm works because it builds genuine self-assurance based on real competence, preparation, evidence, self-knowledge, rather than superficial techniques or positive thinking. When you systematically develop these elements, you create confidence that withstands pressure, performs under stress, and grows stronger through challenges rather than being diminished by them. Chapter 8. Advanced Influence. Getting what you want, without force. Influence is not about overpowering people or manipulating them into doing what you want. It's about understanding human psychology deeply enough to create conditions where people naturally want to cooperate with you. The most powerful influence techniques work by aligning with how people already think, feel, and make decisions rather than fighting against their natural tendencies. The foundation of ethical influence is understanding that people don't resist ideas, they create themselves. When you can guide people to discover conclusions, solutions, or decisions on their own, they feel ownership and commitment rather than resentment or resistance. This requires shifting from telling people what to think to helping them think more effectively about their own situations and goals. The first advanced influence technique is assumption reframing. Most people make unconscious assumptions about what's possible, normal, or appropriate in any given situation. These assumptions create invisible boundaries that limit their thinking and decision-making. By skillfully challenging or reframing these assumptions, you can expand their perception of available options. Assumption reframing works by introducing new perspectives that highlight just how arbitrary current limitations actually are. You might ask questions like, what if we didn't have to follow the usual approach? Or, what would be possible if resources weren't a constraint? Or, how would this look if we were starting completely fresh? These questions help people break free from limiting assumptions and consider genuinely new possibilities. The key to effective assumption reframing is making it feel natural and collaborative rather than pushy or argumentative. You're not attacking their current thinking. You're helping them expand it. You present alternative perspectives as interesting possibilities to explore rather than corrections to their supposedly faulty reasoning. The second technique is social proof orchestration. People look to others for guidance about what to think, feel, and do, especially in uncertain situations. By strategically highlighting relevant examples of others who have made similar decisions, you can influence people's perception of what's normal, reasonable, or beneficial. Social proof orchestration requires careful selection of relevant examples that match the person's situation, values, concerns. The examples should come from people they respect or identify with and demonstrate outcomes they want to achieve. Generic testimonials or irrelevant examples can actually backfire by highlighting differences rather than similarities. You can also create social proof through strategic networking and relationship building. When influential people in someone's network support your position or proposal, it carries vastly more weight than your direct advocacy. This requires building genuine relationships with key influencers and helping them understand how your proposals benefit their interests as well. The third technique is cognitive reframing. This involves helping people interpret situations, events, or information in ways that support better decision-making. The exact same facts can be perceived very differently depending on how they're framed and presented. Skilled influence practitioners help people see situations in ways that reveal opportunities rather than just obstacles. Cognitive reframing works by shifting focus from problems to solutions, from costs to benefits, from risks to potential rewards, from what's missing to what's possible. You're not changing the facts. You're helping people interpret those facts in more productive and optimistic ways that enable action rather than paralysis. Effective cognitive reframing requires understanding the other person's current mental framework and gently guiding them toward more empowering interpretations. This means listening carefully to how they describe situations and strategically introducing alternative perspectives that open up new possibilities. The fourth technique is reciprocity activation. People feel psychologically obligated to return favors and reciprocate kindness. This principle can be used ethically by providing genuine value before asking for anything in return. When you help people solve problems, achieve goals, or gain insights, they naturally want to cooperate with your requests. Reciprocity activation works best when the value you provide is unexpected, personalized, clearly beneficial to the recipient. It should feel like a genuine gift rather than an obvious manipulation tactic. The goal is to create positive feelings and goodwill that naturally lead to cooperation rather than obligation that feels manipulative. You can activate reciprocity through providing useful information, making valuable introductions, offering practical assistance, sharing relevant expertise, or simply giving genuine recognition and appreciation. The key is that your giving should be authentic and focused on their needs rather than obviously designed to create obligation. The fifth technique is consistency leveraging. People have a strong psychological need to remain consistent with their previous statements, decisions, public commitments. Once someone takes a position or makes a commitment, they feel internal pressure to act in ways that support that position, even when circumstances change. Consistency leveraging involves helping people connect your proposals to commitments, values, or positions they've already established. If someone has publicly committed to improving customer service, you can frame your proposal as a way to fulfill that commitment. If they've stated certain values, you can show how your request aligns with those values. The key to ethical consistency leveraging is ensuring the connections you highlight are genuine and beneficial, rather than superficial or manipulative. You're helping people see how your proposal supports their authentic commitments and values, not tricking them into compliance through artificial consistency pressure. The sixth technique is scarcity and urgency creation. People value things more when they perceive them as rare, limited, or time-sensitive. This principle can be used ethically when the scarcity or urgency is genuine and relevant to the person's goals. Creating false scarcity is manipulative and backfires spectacularly when discovered. Genuine scarcity might include limited availability of opportunities, resources, or timing windows. Real urgency might involve actual deadlines, consequences, or changing market conditions. The key is to help people understand actual time sensitivity, rather than creating artificial pressure through fake deadlines or false limitations. When highlighting scarcity or urgency, you should also provide clear information about why the limitation exists and what the consequences of delay might be. This helps people make informed decisions rather than feeling pressured into hasty choices they might regret later. The seventh technique is emotional alignment. People make decisions based on emotions, then justify them with logic. Effective influence requires connecting with people's genuine emotions and helping them see how your proposal satisfies their emotional needs and desires, not just their logical requirements. Emotional alignment means understanding what people really care about at a deeper level than their stated rational preferences. What are their fears, hopes, ambitions, values? How do they want to feel about themselves and their decisions? What emotional outcomes are they trying to achieve or avoid? Once you understand someone's emotional drivers, you can frame your communication in ways that connect with those feelings while still providing solid logical support. You're not manipulating emotions. You're helping people see how your proposal aligns with what they genuinely care about most deeply. These advanced influence techniques work because they align with natural human psychology rather than fighting against it. They help people make better decisions that serve their interests while also achieving your legitimate objectives. When used ethically, they create win-win outcomes that strengthen relationships and build long-term cooperation and trust. Chapter 9. Crisis communication, staying powerful when everything falls apart. Crisis situations reveal who has real communication power and who just appears confident when things are easy. When pressure mounts, emotions run high, stakes become critical, most people's communication skills completely collapse. They become reactive, defensive, scattered, or totally paralyzed. But masters of crisis communication actually become more powerful and influential during difficult times because they know how to maintain composure, clarity, leadership when others lose control. Crisis communication is not about having all the answers or preventing all problems. It's about maintaining your effectiveness and influence when facing unexpected challenges, uncertainty, high-stakes pressure. The people who master this skill become the ones others turn to when things go wrong, which creates enormous opportunities for leadership and advancement. The first principle of crisis communication is emotional regulation under pressure. When crisis hits, your first responsibility is managing your own emotional state, because your emotions will either stabilize or destabilize everyone around you. People look to leaders for emotional cues about how serious the situation is and how they should respond. Emotional regulation doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It means processing emotions internally before they leak out in destructive ways. You feel the stress, anxiety, urgency, but you don't let those feelings control your communication or decision-making. This emotional control gives others confidence that you can handle the situation effectively. Techniques for crisis emotional regulation include controlled breathing to maintain physiological calm, strategic pausing before responding to avoid reactive statements, grounding yourself in facts rather than fears, focusing on solutions rather than dwelling on problems. These practices help you maintain the clear thinking necessary for effective crisis leadership. The second principle is information management and transparency. During crisis, people are desperately hungry for information, and they'll create their own explanations if you don't provide clear, accurate updates. This rumor generation often makes situations far worse than they actually are, so proactive communication is absolutely essential for maintaining control and confidence. Effective crisis information management means providing regular updates even when you don't have complete information. You communicate what you know, what you don't know, what you're doing to find out more, when you expect to have additional information. This transparency builds trust and prevents the information vacuum that leads to speculation and panic. You should also acknowledge the seriousness of situations without being alarmist or defeatist. People need to understand you're taking things seriously and responding appropriately. But they also need confidence that the situation is manageable and you have a plan. This balance requires extremely careful word choice and tone management. The third principle is solution-focused communication. Crisis situations naturally generate problem-focused thinking, where people become completely absorbed in analyzing what went wrong, who's to blame, how bad things might get. While some problem analysis is necessary, effective crisis communication quickly shifts focus to solution development and action planning. Solution-focused communication means acknowledging problems without dwelling on them, redirecting energy toward constructive action, maintaining optimism about finding workable solutions. You ask questions like, what can we do right now to improve this situation? What resources do we have available? What would success look like given our current constraints? This approach doesn't mean ignoring real problems or being unrealistically positive. It means channeling mental and emotional energy toward productive problem solving rather than getting stuck in circular problem analysis or blame assignment that doesn't improve anything. The fourth principle is stakeholder-specific messaging. Different groups of people affected by a crisis have completely different concerns, information needs, decision-making authority. Effective crisis communication involves tailoring your message content, timing, delivery method to each stakeholder group's specific situation and requirements. Internal team members need detailed information about immediate action steps, role clarifications, resource availability. Senior leadership needs strategic perspective, impact assessment, recommendation options. External partners need relevant updates without confidential details. Customers need reassurance about how the situation affects them and what you're doing to protect their interests. Creating stakeholder-specific messaging requires understanding each group's priorities, concerns, decision-making processes. You provide enough information for them to feel informed and confident without overwhelming them with irrelevant details or creating unnecessary anxiety about aspects that don't affect them. The fifth principle is decisive leadership communication. Crises require decisions to be made quickly, with incomplete information under extreme time pressure. Effective crisis communicators can gather input quickly, synthesize information efficiently, communicate decisions clearly even when they're not completely certain about all the implications. Decisive leadership communication involves stating decisions clearly, explaining the reasoning behind them, assigning specific responsibilities with deadlines, establishing follow-up processes for monitoring results, and making adjustments. You don't wait for perfect information or universal consensus, because delay often makes problems significantly worse. The key is balancing speed with thoroughness. You move quickly enough to address urgent needs, but thoughtfully enough to avoid creating bigger problems through hasty decisions. This requires developing excellent judgment about when more analysis is needed versus when action is more important than additional planning. The sixth principle is reputation protection and recovery. How you communicate during crisis significantly impacts your long-term reputation and relationships. People remember how you handled pressure far more than they remember the specific problems you faced. This makes crisis communication an opportunity to demonstrate character, competence, leadership, rather than just a challenge to survive. Reputation protection involves taking appropriate responsibility without unnecessary self-blame, maintaining professional standards even under pressure, following through on commitments made during crisis periods. You don't promise things you can't deliver, but you do absolutely everything possible to fulfill the commitments you make. Recovery communication focuses on learning from the crisis, improving systems and processes to prevent similar problems, demonstrating you've grown stronger and more capable as a result of handling the challenge. This positions crises as growth opportunities rather than just problems to overcome. The seventh principle is relationship strengthening through adversity. Crisis situations can either damage relationships through poor communication or strengthen them through effective crisis management. When you handle crisis well, people develop deeper trust and respect for your leadership capabilities and character. Relationship strengthening happens when you maintain clear communication, keep commitments made under pressure, show genuine concern for others' welfare, follow through on promises to improve situations. People who see you perform well under pressure become much stronger advocates and supporters in the future. You can also use crisis situations to demonstrate values and priorities that might not be visible during normal operations. How you treat people when resources are scarce, what principles you maintain under pressure, how you balance competing interests during difficult times, all reveal character that builds long-term trust and influence. Crisis communication mastery transforms you from someone who struggles during difficult periods to someone who actually gains influence and respect through effective crisis leadership. Instead of avoiding challenging situations, you become the person others actively seek out when they need strong, steady leadership during uncertain times. Part 4, Chapters 10-12. Chapter 10, Building Communication Systems, Creating Influence that Lasts. Most people approach communication as a series of random, disconnected interactions without any systematic strategy for building cumulative influence over time. They have some good conversations and some terrible ones, random successes and unexpected failures, but absolutely no coherent system for consistently developing their communication power and expanding their influence. Building lasting influence requires systematic approaches that compound over time rather than relying on occasional moments of brilliance. The foundation of systematic communication influence is understanding that every single interaction either builds or slowly erodes your reputation for competence, trustworthiness, leadership. People form impressions about your communication abilities based on patterns they observe over time, not just individual conversations. This means you need consistent standards and approaches that reinforce positive perceptions through multiple touchpoints. The first element of communication systems is message consistency across contexts. Your core messages about your capabilities, values, priorities, expertise should remain consistent whether you're speaking in formal presentations, casual conversations, written communications, or crisis situations. This consistency helps people develop clear, accurate impressions of who you are and what you stand for. Message consistency doesn't mean being rigid or robotic in your communication. It means having clear, authentic core themes that appear reliably across different formats and situations. When people interact with you multiple times, they should get reinforcing evidence about your key strengths and values, rather than confusing mixed signals that make you hard to categorize or remember. You develop message consistency by identifying your core professional identity and value proposition, then finding natural ways to reinforce these themes in diverse communication situations. This requires conscious preparation and practice, but it becomes increasingly natural over time as you develop communication habits that automatically reinforce your desired reputation. The second element is relationship mapping and strategic networking. Influence flows through relationships, and building systematic influence requires understanding your relationship ecosystem and developing strategic approaches for strengthening key connections over time. This means identifying who influences whom in your professional environment and building authentic relationships with those key connectors. Relationship mapping involves analyzing formal and informal power structures, identifying decision makers and influencers, understanding relationship dynamics between key players, recognizing opportunities for adding value to important relationships. This analysis helps you prioritize relationship-building efforts and develop appropriate strategies for different types of connections. Strategic networking goes far beyond collecting contacts to focus on creating genuine mutual value with people who can expand your influence and opportunities. This requires understanding others' goals, challenges, priorities, then finding authentic ways to help them achieve their objectives while building stronger professional relationships. The third element is expertise positioning and thought leadership development. People develop lasting influence by becoming known for specific expertise and insights that others find genuinely valuable. This requires consistently developing your knowledge and capabilities in chosen areas, then systematically sharing those insights through multiple communication channels. Expertise positioning involves identifying areas where you can develop distinctive competence, then consistently communicating insights and perspectives that demonstrate that expertise. This might include industry knowledge, technical skills, problem-solving approaches, leadership philosophies, or relationship-building capabilities that others recognize as valuable. Thought leadership development requires regularly creating and sharing content that showcases your expertise and provides genuine value to others. This might include presentations, articles, social media posts, internal reports, strategic recommendations, or informal mentoring that helps others learn from your knowledge and experience. The fourth element is feedback systems and continuous improvement. Systematic influence building requires regular feedback about your communication effectiveness and consistent efforts to improve your skills and approaches. Most people receive very little direct feedback about their communication and therefore miss crucial opportunities to enhance their influence. Effective feedback systems include seeking input from trusted colleagues and mentors, tracking outcomes from important communications, observing others' responses and reactions to your messages, regularly assessing your progress toward influence and relationship goals. This feedback helps you identify what's working brilliantly and what needs adjustment. Continuous improvement means treating communication as a skill that can always be enhanced rather than a fixed ability you're stuck with. You study effective communicators, analyze successful interactions, practice new techniques, experiment with different approaches to expand your communication repertoire and effectiveness. The fifth element is platform development and visibility creation. Lasting influence requires that people actually know about your capabilities and expertise, which means systematically creating visibility for your ideas, contributions, achievements. This involves identifying appropriate platforms and opportunities to showcase your communication skills and thought leadership. Platform development might include volunteering for high-visibility projects, seeking speaking opportunities, writing for company publications, participating in industry events, joining professional organizations, or taking leadership roles in important initiatives. These platforms give you opportunities to demonstrate your communication capabilities to broader audiences. Visibility creation also requires documenting and sharing your achievements and insights rather than assuming good work will automatically be recognized. This means strategically communicating about your successes, helping others understand your contributions, creating tangible evidence of your expertise and impact. The sixth element is mentorship systems and talent development. Lasting influence involves developing others who can extend and amplify your impact over time. By mentoring and developing other effective communicators, you create a network of people who understand and support your approaches and can advocate for your ideas even when you're not present. Mentorship systems involve identifying high potential individuals who can benefit from your guidance, then systematically helping them develop their communication skills and advance their careers. This creates loyalty and advocacy, while also establishing your reputation as someone who develops talent and builds strong teams. Succession planning means preparing others to carry forward your ideas and approaches even if you move to different roles or organizations. This might involve training team members, documenting your methods, creating process improvements, or developing organizational capabilities that outlast your direct involvement. The seventh element is legacy building and institutional influence. The highest level of communication influence involves creating changes in how organizations or industries think and operate. This requires developing approaches that become embedded in systems, processes, cultures, rather than just influencing individual decisions or relationships. Legacy building involves identifying opportunities to improve how communication happens within your organization or industry, then developing and implementing systematic improvements that benefit multiple people over extended periods. This might include training programs, communication standards, process improvements, or cultural changes that enhance effectiveness. Institutional influence means becoming someone whose ideas and approaches fundamentally shape how others think about communication, leadership, problem solving. This level of influence requires consistent excellence over extended periods, but creates impact that continues long after individual interactions or relationships end. Building communication systems that create lasting influence transforms you from someone who has occasional communication successes to someone who systematically expands their impact and reputation over time. These systems ensure your influence grows consistently rather than fluctuating randomly based on individual interactions or circumstances. Chapter 11. The Charisma Code, Manufacturing Magnetic Presence. Charisma is not some mysterious quality that certain lucky people are born with and others lack forever. It's a specific combination of behaviors, attitudes, communication patterns that can be learned, developed, deployed strategically. The most charismatic people you know became that way through understanding and practicing specific techniques, not through genetic luck or natural talent. The foundation of charisma is making other people feel important, valued, genuinely understood when they interact with you. Charismatic people have mastered the art of focusing their attention and energy on others in ways that create powerful, positive emotions. This isn't manipulation or fake interest. It's genuine engagement combined with specific skills that amplify the impact of that engagement. Most people think charisma is about being entertaining, charming, or the center of attention. But real charisma is about making others feel like they're the center of attention when you're with them. Charismatic people have this rare ability to make each person they interact with feel like the most important person in the room at that moment. The first element of the Charisma Code is presence intensity. This means giving your complete, undivided attention to whoever you're communicating with, regardless of distractions, competing priorities, or other interesting people nearby. Most people give only partial attention while thinking about other things, checking devices, or scanning the room for more important conversations. presence intensity requires mental discipline to focus completely on the current interaction. You're not thinking about your next meeting, your phone notifications, or other people you want to talk to. Your entire mental and emotional energy is directed toward understanding and engaging with the person right in front of you. This level of attention is remarkably rare in modern society where everyone is constantly distracted and multitasking. When someone experiences your complete focused attention, it creates a powerful positive emotion that they strongly associate with you. They feel heard, understood, valued in ways that most interactions simply don't provide. The second element is emotional attunement. Charismatic people are absolute masters at reading and responding to other people's emotional states. They can sense when someone is excited, nervous, proud, frustrated, uncertain, and they adjust their communication style to match and support those emotions appropriately. Emotional attunement involves paying extremely close attention to subtle cues like tone of voice, body language, energy level, word choice that reveal how someone is feeling beyond what they're explicitly saying. You're reading between the lines to understand their emotional experience, not just their factual communication. Once you understand someone's emotional state, you can respond in ways that validate and support their feelings. If they're excited about something, you match their enthusiasm. If they're worried about a challenge, you acknowledge their concern and offer appropriate support. If they're proud of an achievement, you celebrate with them genuinely. The third element is curiosity amplification. Charismatic people ask better questions and show genuine interest in learning about others. They're not just waiting for their turn to talk or looking for opportunities to share their own stories. They're authentically curious about other people's experiences, perspectives, insights. Curiosity amplification means asking follow-up questions that show you're really listening and want to understand more deeply. Instead of surface-level small talk, you probe into what makes people passionate, what challenges they're facing, what they're learning, what they're excited about. These deeper questions create much more meaningful connections. The absolutely critical thing is that your curiosity must be genuine, not strategic. People can instantly sense when you're asking questions just to appear interested versus when you're actually fascinated by their answers. Real curiosity creates real connection, while fake interest feels manipulative and hollow. The fourth element is energy management and contagion. Charismatic people understand that energy is genuinely contagious, and they consciously manage their energy level to create positive emotional states in others. They bring appropriate energy to different situations, whether that's calm confidence in crisis moments, enthusiasm for new projects, or focused intensity for important discussions. Energy management requires self-awareness about your current emotional and physical state combined with the ability to consciously adjust your energy to serve the situation and the people you're with. If you're tired or stressed, you don't let that negative energy infect your interactions. If the situation calls for high energy, you find ways to generate genuine enthusiasm. Energy contagion works because humans unconsciously mirror the emotional states of people around them, especially people they respect or admire. When you consistently bring positive, appropriate energy to interactions, people start feeling better when they're around you, which makes them want to spend more time with you. The fifth element is storytelling mastery. Charismatic people are compelling storytellers who can make ordinary experiences interesting and meaningful. They understand how to structure narratives, create emotional engagement, use stories to illustrate points, connect with others, create memorable shared experiences. Effective storytelling involves selecting relevant details that create vivid mental pictures, using appropriate pacing to build tension and interest, including emotional content that helps listeners connect with the experience, ending with insights or lessons that add value beyond entertainment. Charismatic storytelling isn't about having the most interesting life or most dramatic experiences. It's about finding the universal human elements in ordinary situations and presenting them in ways that help others see new perspectives or feel understood in their own similar experiences. The sixth element is vulnerability calibration. Charismatic people share appropriate personal information that helps others feel connected to them without oversharing or making others uncomfortable. They understand the crucial difference between strategic vulnerability that builds connection and emotional dumping that creates awkwardness. Strategic vulnerability means sharing challenges, struggles, uncertainties that others can relate to while maintaining your overall competence and strength. You might share a professional challenge you're navigating, a skill you're working to develop, or a lesson you learned from a mistake. The key is that your vulnerability should serve the relationship and the conversation, not just your need for attention or emotional support. You're sharing personal information to help others feel less alone in their own challenges or to demonstrate that growth and learning are ongoing processes for everyone. The seventh element is positive assumption and benefit of the doubt. Charismatic people consistently assume positive intentions and give others the benefit of the doubt rather than being suspicious, cynical, or quick to judge. This creates psychological safety that allows others to be more open, authentic, creative in their interactions. Positive assumption means interpreting ambiguous behavior in the most charitable way possible, giving people credit for good intentions even when their actions don't work out perfectly, focusing on people's strengths and potential rather than their weaknesses and limitations. This doesn't mean being naive or ignoring red flags when they genuinely appear. It means starting from a position of trust and respect rather than requiring people to prove themselves worthy of positive treatment. This approach brings out the best in others because people tend to live up to the expectations others have of them. The eighth element is celebration and recognition. Charismatic people are genuinely generous with praise, recognition, celebration of others' achievements. They notice when people do good work, overcome challenges, or demonstrate positive qualities, and they express genuine appreciation for those accomplishments. Effective recognition is specific, timely, focused on the impact or quality of what someone did rather than generic praise. Instead of just saying, "Good job," you explain specifically what was valuable about their contribution and why it mattered. This shows you were paying attention and genuinely value their efforts. Charismatic people also celebrate others' successes without feeling competitive or diminished. They understand that recognizing others' achievements doesn't reduce their own value, and that generous recognition actually increases their own influence and likability. The Charisma Code works because it addresses fundamental human needs for attention, understanding, recognition, connection. When you consistently make others feel valued and Important through your communication style, you become someone people want to be around, work with, support. This creates opportunities, influence, relationships that compound over time into genuine personal and professional power. Chapter 12. Difficult Conversations. Navigating Conflict Without Losing Respect. Most people avoid difficult conversations until problems become full-blown crises, or they approach them so poorly that they damage relationships and make situations significantly worse. The ability to navigate challenging discussions skillfully is honestly one of the most valuable communication competencies you can possibly develop, because it transforms potential relationship damage into relationship strengthening and turns conflicts into collaborations. Difficult conversations are not inherently bad or destructive. They become destructive when they're handled poorly. When approached with the right mindset, preparation, techniques, challenging discussions can actually build trust, deepen relationships, create better outcomes for everyone involved. The key is learning to have these conversations in ways that preserve dignity, maintain respect, focus on solutions rather than blame. The foundation of effective, difficult conversations is shifting from adversarial thinking to collaborative problem solving. Most people approach conflict as a battle where someone wins and someone loses. But this mindset absolutely guarantees relationship damage, regardless of the immediate outcome. Collaborative thinking focuses on understanding different perspectives and finding solutions that address everyone's legitimate needs. The first principle of difficult conversation mastery is preparation and emotional regulation. Before engaging in any challenging discussion, you need to clarify your objectives, manage your emotional state, develop a strategy for keeping the conversation productive. Most difficult conversations fail because people enter them emotionally reactive and without clear goals. Preparation involves identifying what outcome you actually want from the conversation, not just what you want to say or prove. Are you trying to solve a specific problem, change someone's behavior, clarify expectations, repair a relationship, or prevent future issues? Having clear objectives helps you stay focused on productive outcomes, rather than getting sidetracked by emotions or blame. Emotional regulation requires processing your feelings about the situation before the conversation so they don't leak out in destructive ways during the discussion. If you're angry, hurt, frustrated, disappointed, you need to acknowledge those emotions and develop strategies for managing them during the conversation. The second principle is opening with intention and respect. How you start a difficult conversation largely determines how it will unfold. Aggressive, accusatory, or emotional openings immediately trigger defensiveness and conflict escalation. Respectful, intentional openings create space for productive dialogue even about challenging topics. Effective openings acknowledge the difficulty of the conversation, express your positive intentions, invite collaboration. You might say something like, "I'd like to discuss something that's been concerning me, and I genuinely hope we can work together to find a good solution." Or, "I value our relationship and want to address an issue that's been affecting how we work together." The key is demonstrating you see the other person as a collaborator in solving a problem rather than as an opponent to defeat. This framing encourages cooperation rather than defensiveness and sets the stage for productive problem solving. The third principle is separating facts from interpretations. Most difficult conversations get completely derailed because people present their interpretations, opinions, assumptions as if they were absolute facts. This creates unnecessary argument about subjective perspectives rather than focusing on objective information and workable solutions. Facts are observable, verifiable information that both parties can agree on. Interpretations are your opinions, assumptions, conclusions about what those facts mean. Separating these elements allows you to discuss objective information without immediately triggering disagreement about subjective interpretations. For example, saying you don't respect deadlines is an interpretation that will likely trigger immediate defensiveness. Saying the project was submitted 2 days after the agreed deadline is a fact that can be discussed objectively. Once you establish the facts, you can explore different interpretations and solutions without getting stuck in argument about subjective perspectives. The fourth principle is listening for understanding, not rebuttal. Most people listen during difficult conversations primarily to find flaws in the other person's reasoning or opportunities to present their counterarguments. This defensive listening prevents real understanding and escalates conflict because people feel unheard and dismissed. Listening for understanding means genuinely trying to comprehend the other person's perspective, concerns, needs, even when you disagree with their conclusions or approaches. You're seeking to understand their reasoning, their constraints, their desired outcomes before focusing on your own position. This type of listening often reveals information that significantly changes your understanding of the situation and opens up solution possibilities that weren't apparent when you were focused only on defending your own perspective. Understanding doesn't require agreement, but it creates a foundation for finding mutually acceptable solutions. The fifth principle is acknowledging valid points and shared concerns. Even in conflicts, there are usually some areas of agreement or shared concern that can serve as foundation for problem solving. Acknowledging these commonalities helps de-escalate tension and creates collaborative momentum. Valid point acknowledgement means recognizing when the other person raises legitimate concerns or accurate observations, even if you disagree with their overall position or proposed solutions. This shows intellectual honesty and reduces their need to keep arguing points you've already accepted. Shared concern identification involves finding areas where you both want similar outcomes, even if you disagree about methods or priorities. You might both want project success, customer satisfaction, team harmony, efficient processes, even while disagreeing about specific approaches. The sixth principle is solution-focused redirection. Difficult conversations can easily become stuck in endless problem analysis, blame assignment, or emotional venting that doesn't improve anything. Effective conversation management involves acknowledging problems and emotions, but consistently redirecting energy towards solution development and action planning. Solution-focused questions include: what would need to change for this to work better? What options do we have for addressing this concern? What would success look like from both our perspectives? What specific steps could we take to improve this situation? The key is not rushing to solutions before problems are fully understood, but preventing getting stuck in endless problem discussion without moving toward resolution. You want enough problem analysis to understand what needs to be solved, but not so much that the conversation becomes dominated by negativity and blame. The seventh principle is agreement documentation and follow-through. Many difficult conversations end with verbal agreements that are later forgotten, misremembered, or interpreted differently by different parties. Effective conversation closure includes confirming what was agreed to, establishing specific next steps, creating accountability for follow-through. Agreement documentation doesn't have to be formal, but it should include clear understanding of what each person committed to do, specific timelines for action, planned follow-up to assess progress. This prevents the same issues from resurfacing due to unclear or unfulfilled agreements. Follow-through is absolutely critical because broken commitments from difficult conversations often create worse relationship damage than the original problems. When you make agreements during challenging discussions, you must prioritize fulfilling those commitments to demonstrate the conversation led to real positive change. Mastering difficult conversations transforms you from someone who avoids conflict until it becomes destructive to someone who can address problems early and constructively. This skill prevents small issues from becoming major crises, builds stronger relationships through effective problem solving, establishes your reputation as someone who can handle challenging situations with grace and effectiveness. Part 5, Chapters 13-15, Final. Chapter 13, Digital Communication Mastery. The digital revolution fundamentally changed how we communicate, but most people are still using old-school strategies in virtual environments. This mismatch severely limits their influence. Digital communication removes nonverbal cues like tone, body language, facial expressions, energy levels. This means you must become more skilled at creating influence through word choice, message structure, timing, strategic use of available digital tools. Different digital platforms have different communication norms and user expectations. What works in email doesn't work on social media. Platform optimization requires understanding specific characteristics of each environment and adapting your style to match user expectations while maintaining your authentic voice. Digital environments are extremely competitive for attention. Your communication must break through constant noise and hold attention long enough to deliver your message effectively. Attention capture starts with compelling openings that immediately signal value, relevance, urgency. Attention retention requires strategic formatting, short paragraphs, bullet points, bold text for key points, strategic white space, logical flow. Without physical presence, creating emotional engagement requires more intentional effort. Emotional connection comes from understanding and addressing your audience's concerns, aspirations, fears through your messaging. Personal storytelling becomes even more important because stories create emotional engagement and help people feel connected to you as a person rather than just an information source. Chapter 14. The Mastery Mindset. Becoming a lifelong student, communication mastery is not a destination you reach and maintain effortlessly. It's an ongoing journey of learning, observation, practice, refinement. The most powerful communicators never stop studying human psychology, observing social dynamics, experimenting with new approaches because they understand both communication contexts and human behavior constantly evolve. The mastery mindset separates people who plateau at basic competence from those who continue developing extraordinary influence throughout their careers. This mindset involves treating every interaction as a learning opportunity, approaching communication challenges with curiosity rather than frustration, systematically studying what works and what doesn't. Real mastery comes from developing sophisticated observation skills and consistently analyzing your communication experiences. You become your own communication laboratory, constantly testing hypotheses, refining approaches based on real-world feedback. Pattern recognition development is crucial. Human behavior follows predictable patterns, and master communicators become expert at recognizing these patterns quickly and adapting accordingly. You observe how different personality types respond to different approaches, how cultural backgrounds affect preferences, how stress levels change receptivity. Effective feedback seeking involves asking specific questions about communication effectiveness rather than general performance questions. You develop skills in reading nonverbal feedback during conversations and adjusting your approach in real time. This dynamic adjustment capability separates good communicators from truly great ones. Chapter 15, Your Communication Revolution, Implementation and Domination. Everything you've learned becomes worthless unless you implement it systematically and consistently. Most people consume communication training, then return to old habits within weeks because they lack a clear plan for turning knowledge into automatic behavior. This final chapter gives you a systematic approach for implementing these principles and transforming yourself into someone who dominates every communication situation. Real transformation happens when these principles become so deeply ingrained you use them automatically without conscious effort. This level of integration requires systematic practice, structured feedback, consistent refinement over months, not days or weeks. Your communication revolution starts with honest assessment of current abilities and clear vision of where you want to be. Rate yourself honestly across all areas: first impressions, authority projection, persuasion abilities, crisis communication, charisma development, relationship building. Identify your strongest areas and biggest weaknesses to prioritize improvement efforts strategically. Start with foundational skills that support everything else before moving to advanced techniques. Emotional regulation and basic confidence are prerequisites for effective influence and persuasion. Clear thinking and message organization support both formal presentations and casual conversations. Improvement requires deliberate practice, not just casual effort. Create specific practice scenarios that challenge your abilities, provide feedback opportunities, push you beyond your comfort zone in controlled environments. Practice should be more challenging than normal situations so real conversations feel easier. You need reliable ways to assess progress and identify areas needing continued work. This requires both formal feedback mechanisms and informal observation skills. Formal feedback might include regular check-ins with mentors, structured assessment from colleagues, video recording, and analysis. Informal feedback comes from developing sensitivity to how people respond to your communication. The goal is not just knowing communication techniques, but using them automatically without conscious effort. This requires consistent repetition until new patterns become default responses. Focus on one specific behavior at a time until it becomes automatic before adding new behaviors. Small daily improvements compound over months into dramatic transformations. Once you've developed basic competence through practice, apply new skills in increasingly challenging real-world situations. Start with low-risk situations where mistakes won't have serious consequences. Gradually work up to high-stakes communications where your skills can create significant opportunities. Communication mastery is a lifelong journey, not a one-time achievement. Even after transforming your basic effectiveness, continue developing more sophisticated capabilities. Advanced development might include specialized influence techniques, expertise in specific contexts like negotiations or crisis management, building thought leadership platforms. One of the most powerful ways to solidify mastery is helping others develop their skills. Teaching forces you to understand principles more deeply, provides additional practice opportunities, builds your reputation as someone with valuable expertise. Your communication revolution culminates when these skills become so natural you don't think about them. Consciously during conversations, you simply communicate powerfully, effectively, influentially, because that's who you've become, not because you're trying to use specific techniques. This transformation takes time, effort, consistent practice, but the results are extraordinary. You become someone who commands respect, influences decisions, builds strong relationships, achieves goals through strategic communication power. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to demonstrate capabilities, create value, build relationships, and reputation supporting long-term success. The techniques in this book have power to transform not just how you communicate, but how others perceive you, what opportunities come your way, what you're able to achieve throughout your career and life. But only if you implement them systematically, consistently, with commitment to continuous improvement, separating masters from amateurs. Your communication revolution starts now with your very next conversation. The only question is whether you'll commit to the process, creating extraordinary results, or settle for modest improvements from casual effort. The choice is yours, and it will determine whether you join the ranks of truly powerful communicators or remain among the masses struggling to be heard, respected, influential,